WebEx here in a little bit. And first up, we have Department of Corrections. And if Shirley, if you give us a briefing.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and Committee. You should have in front of you, you should have in front of you the budget analysis for the Department of Corrections. I also provided a couple of extra sheets of information. There's one, which is one of the briefing book articles on the educational programs from the Department of Corrections. We'll talk about some of that today. And then there's a table of the evidence-based programs funding. So if I may, Mr. Chair, I'm going to start the budget analysis on page 5. We'll start with the current year, fiscal year 2024. There's a table at the top there, and I'll go through each of these line items. We start with the approved amount from last year's session. There were a couple of adjustments made to those. To that amount, the reappropriations, there was a reappropriation of evidence-based juvenile programs of $53.7 million and a reappropriation in the operations of $3.2 million. In addition, the agency has a revised estimate, which includes 3 supplementals. The first is the pay plan shortfall, which you've seen in all of the budgets you've heard so far. There's also an amount of $1.2 million to fully fund the food service contract. You'll see both food service and health care contracts usually have to be adjusted. Those are all estimated depending on population. So as they get closer to the time they need those, they'll re-estimate those amounts. And then the third one is the career campus match. I'll provide some information on that, and that's also why I've given you that educational briefing book article. The agency started a few years ago with what they call a Pathways for Success, and they were allowed to form a 501c3 to raise money. They formed a consortium of correctional higher education in 2019. And one of the things that they would like to do, which is what part of this 10 million is on the back page of this educational handout I've provided you, is at the Lansing Correctional Facility, they'd like to build a career campus. They have more than 14 public, nonprofit, and private entities that are going to collaborate to try and provide training and education for the inmates, and they want to build a facility for that. They would like the state to provide 50% as a match to try and bring in the additional money for the rest of the building. And what they have asked for is 10 million in fiscal year 24 and 10 million in fiscal year 25. You'll also notice there, number 6 in the table, there's an adjustment of a negative 53.3 million. That in essence is the majority of the reappropriation for the evidence-based juvenile programs is not in their expenditures, so that's going to go back into the fund. And that's what the majority of that money is. On page 6, you have the governor's recommendation. The governor's recommending $588.2 million, including $536.2 million state general fund. It's an all funds decrease of $10.4 million, and the decrease is primarily due to the governor not recommending the $10 million for the career campus in 24. However, you will see she puts the entire $20 million in fiscal year 25. The other slight adjustment was the food service contract from the time that the agency submitted their budget in September and when the governor was putting her recommendation together, the food service contract was re-estimated and it came in a little bit lower. So that number, although the governor recommends the food service contract, the amount was reduced by a small amount. And with that, I will stand for questions on 24.
Any questions for Shirley for 2024?
Okay. On page 7, sometimes we get questions on comparing the current year, fiscal year 24, to what the actuals were in 23. And this table gives you what those changes were. And you can see those first 5 bullets. Those were actually changes that the legislature made last year when we were doing the 24 budget, those additions. And then again, there's the change with the 3 supplementals for this year. And that's primarily the difference between the actuals of 2023 and 2024. On page 8, we'll go into the budget year, fiscal year 2025. The agency is requesting $671.9 million, including $628.2 million state general fund. That's for the Department of Corrections and all the facilities. This is an all funds increase of $73.4 million or 12.3%, and an SGF increase of $81.7 million or 14.9%. And you'll notice there's quite a few enhancements. So I'll go through those, and at any time, if you have any questions, please stop me. So the first one is within the facilities, they would like to reduce the shrinkage in salaries and wages to 5% for all of the facilities across the board. At this point, each of the facilities has a different shrinkage rate. They vary from 17.4% at Norton, Lansing's 10%. Winfield currently is at 5%, so they aren't asking for anything with this enhancement. But what the facilities would like is all of the facilities to be at the same shrinkage rate of 5%. So that's what that first adjustment is of $22.5 million. The second one is the Community Corrections Advisory Committee has asked for an additional $5 million. They're looking for $1.5 million for additional intensive supervision officers and $3.5 million for operating expenditures. Again, you'll see that both the food service contract, an additional $4.3 million, and then the health service contract, $2.5 million. And you will probably see those then next year if there's any increase or decrease, again, because of the estimates with populations. Number 5 is they are asking for $224,000 for the Children's Discovery Center. That is a program that would allow for the population to have events to bring their children to, so that while they are incarcerated, they can spend time and have activities with their family and their children. And they currently have at the Topeka facility, at the Discovery Center over at the Topeka Zoo, the Children's Discovery Center, they'll have an event where the population can go and spend some time with their children. And they would like to expand that to 3 additional facilities with 6 events for the Juvenile Correctional Complex, the Hutchinson Correctional Complex, and the Ellsworth Correctional Complex. So they're asking for additional money there. And in addition to that, having some changes to their visitor areas at the facilities so that when the kids do come in and visit, the population, they have some kid-friendly events that could occur there at the facility. Number 6, the Kansas Correctional Industries. Just as a reminder, that is within the corrections agency. It is the entity that helps, like the sign shop and the different things where the inmates can build furniture and produce signs. They have used in the past some of the funds that they have collected in the sale of those products to backfill if the food service contract needed additional money, if there wasn't enough appropriated. And so what they're asking for is for that money to be restored to the Kansas Correctional Industries. One of the other things, number 7, is the Correctional Institutions Building Fund. That amount of $5 million has been the same since its inception, and they would like that changed and calculated with inflation so that they can have an increase there to meet the demands of all of the rehab and repair of all the facilities. Again, that career campus match, this is the same as in 24 with 10 million in 25. The demolition of the Lansing Correctional Facility, you'll remember that was in the budget last year. That money was removed so that there could be some negotiations and see if there was something they could use that building for. And then there's a request for $40.2 million to construct the new health center at the Topeka Correctional Facility. That was also in last year's budget in their request and was not recommended. So with all of those being part of the agency's request, the governor recommends $1 billion, including $988.8 million state general fund. This is an all funds increase of $357.5 million or 53%, and an SGF increase of $360 million. And this primarily is the governor added in the $377 million to rebuild the Hutch Correctional Facility. Although that wasn't in the agency's original request, that has been in their 5-year plan, and that was discussed with the agency. So the governor did not recommend many of the enhancements, including the shrinkage rate, the replacing of the Kansas Correctional Industries funding, the demolition of docking. It appears there are still negotiations ongoing for the use of that building, so we're going to put off the demolition of that for another year. Just Lansing. A couple of things that were discussed with the agency after their original recommendation or request came in. There was a request for premium pay and uniform replacement. This was a negotiated agreement with the Kansas Organization of State Employees to provide additional pay for bilingual officers and to provide some of the assistance for the uniforms and to increase the quality of the uniforms. The governor also recommended $218,000 to replace the Justice Assistance Grant that was not approved by the Kansas Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. The governor also recommends $1.5 million for inmate incentive pay. And if I could get you to turn to page 14, there's a little more information on that. In about the middle of the page there, number 12, you'll see those 4 bullet points. The inmates that work there at the facility, and this is just within the Department of Corrections, this isn't the outside industries. There's different levels of pay that they get, and those payments are per day, not per hour. And the other thing I wanted to note is when they do get paid, some of that payment, they don't get to keep all of it. It goes to pay the restitution. It goes to pay child support. There's a mandatory amount that goes into a savings account, but they want to increase those levels there in those 4 bullets. Number 15, the Correctional Industries Building Fund. That there was an adjustment made there. That's an amount that comes from lottery saving or lottery money, and the agency's request was a little higher than what was in that fund to be expended. The Athena 2 master lease payoff, the governor's recommending we pay that lease off 2 years early. And then the career campus match, again, that the governor is recommending the entire 20 million and 25 instead of the 10 and the 10. And the last there is the Hutchinson Correctional Facility of the 377 million. On the next few pages are the supplementals and enhancements that we just went over, but you'll see the descriptions there. I've got a little bit more description on all of those just to give you more information. And with that, Mr. Chair, I will stand for questions. I know that's a lot of information.
Any questions for Shirley? Representative Dobberny.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just curious, and I don't know if you'll have the answer on this, but page 8, number 1, shrinkage, reduce shrinkage. Yes. The 22.5 million to reduce the shrinkage down to 5%. Do you know what the inflation rate is? What are we trying to battle out here?
I do not.
Okay.
That might be something that the Secretary Zamuda could cover, but
that's fine. And then on page 15, you got level A, B, D, C, and D. What does that mean?
Again, the Secretary might provide more information, but I know there are different types of jobs within the facilities that would be the different levels, depending on how much responsibility or how much work there is.
Yeah, and that's fine. If they could just address it when they stand up, that
absolutely.
I appreciate it.
Sure, I just have a question about the demolition for Lansing and Hutch.
Now, the Hutch would be a total rebuild, whereas Lansing has already been rebuilt, and it's just demolishing that old building.
So what would happen to the old building once they rebuild Hutch? Would it be demolished also?
That I'm not sure if they have plans to use any of that facility. Not that I can recall. And I don't know if the demolition is part of the cost in that.
Any other questions for Shirley? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next up. Oh, I thought you were going to speak. Yeah.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm Keith Bradshaw. I'm Executive Director of Contracts and Finance for the Department of Corrections. And I'm just going to try to summarize the governor's recommendation for the agency. Just a few of the questions to respond to those that were just asked here. On the incentive pay levels, those are just different tiers of skill level, with level A being non-skilled labor and level D being for skilled labor. So there's the 4 different tiers there. On the shrinkage question, so shrinkage is supposed to represent what your salary and wage savings would be throughout the course of the fiscal year due to normal natural turnover. And so you would budget your full salary and wage budget and then take a deduction of X% to account for the savings you'd have due to turnover. In reality, what happens is that becomes more of a budget balancing mechanism. So that's why we have shrinkage rates for some facilities in the 16, 17, 20% range, is because their appropriation is not sufficient to fully fund the facility's operation. The 5% shrinkage rate would be more reflective of what their true actual turnover would be in salary savings as a result of that. And why this becomes important is as we fill these positions, we're not hitting that shrinkage target, so we're actually going over budget as a result of having those positions filled. So it forces us to hold open positions that we normally would fill in order to stay within budget. And then lastly, on the Hutchinson project, so there's no demolition incorporated in that cost estimate there. What we would do would be similar to Lansing. We would engage with the community to just look at other options for how that facility could be repurposed for other uses in the future. But there's no current plans for how the old Hutchinson facility would be utilized at this point. So with that, I'll go ahead and start with my testimony. Okay. Is that on yours or mine? Okay. Just a high-level overview of how our operating budget's broken out by expenditures, by type. So as you see on this graph, about 46% of our operating budget is dedicated to salaries and wages for the agency. About 16% dedicated to healthcare for the resident population. And then our next largest group is aid to locals and other assistance at 15% of total budget. And these are the grants to community corrections agencies for the supervision of probationers in the community, as well as grants for juvenile correctional services and expenditures out of the evidence-based programs fund. Breaking it down by expenditure by program, facility operations by far the largest expense for the day-to-day operations of our facilities, roughly 51%. Once we factor in healthcare and food service, that's about 68% of our budget's being dedicated towards incarceration. And then another 3% of that would be going towards offender programs. A large portion of our budget recommendation from the governor is focused on addressing the increase in the resident population. So going into COVID, we were above capacity. We had over 10,000 residents in custody in March of 2020. That included 120 being housed in a contract prison in Arizona and 84 in contracted county beds. With the onset of the pandemic, admissions tailed off pretty significantly due to the court shutdowns, and we had dropped down to an average daily population of around 8,400 by fiscal year 22. Since then, as we came out of the pandemic and the courts opened back up, our population increased pretty significantly. We saw about 16% growth in admissions from 22 to 23, with our fiscal year 23 population ending at 8,900 residents. And so with that, the Sentencing Commission is projecting that this growth will continue on through fiscal year 2033. By fiscal year 29, we will have reached the point where the resident population will meet our physical design capacity of 10,600 beds. As we're currently staffed right now, we have 582 beds offline, so our actual staff capacity is around 8,900, at which point we'll probably hit that somewhere in FY 2026 or fiscal year 27, at which point we'll need additional staffing in order to operate those units and accommodate the population growth there. With the population increase that we've experienced, our support services contracts, we're seeing increases in those, as Shirley has mentioned. That includes food service and medical. On the food service contract with Aramark, we have 102 contract staff who are responsible for the delivery of and management of the food service operations, and we have about 530 residents who earn incentive pay as part of their facility job assignment. They're paid a flat daily rate to work in the kitchens, and so the food service employees from Aramark are responsible for supervising their work. We also have 26 industry workers, and these are residents who have gone through a 6-month training program to earn the National Restaurant Association Serve Safe certification, and then they're paid an hourly rate by Aramark to work in the kitchens there. So with the FY24 budget being approved at a lower population level. That was based on a population of about 8,400 residents and assumed a 2% increase. Since then, we've gotten updated population projection numbers, and we're looking to have an ADP of around 9,200 residents. And in addition, the increase in food costs that everyone's experienced has been, as well as the increase in wages that Aramark's having to pay to stay competitive with the labor markets, has resulted in about a 12.7% increase in the cost per meal. We've been able to identify some savings within our budget in the current fiscal year to put towards these increases, but it wasn't quite enough to fully fund that. So the governor has recommended an additional $878,000 to fully fund the contract in the current fiscal year. In fiscal year 25, based on the fiscal year 25 governor's recommendation of $21.4 million, that does assume a 2% increase in pricing due to inflation, and is based on a population of about 9,550 residents. This also includes $271,000 to help us address some equipment issues. Our contract since 1997 has a $300,000 a year set aside to replace and repair our food service equipment. And just over time, we've not been able to keep up with maintaining and replacing that equipment on schedule. We conducted an assessment of our equipment over the summer and have about $1.8 million worth of equipment that's beyond its useful life that would take, at this point, at least 6 years to replace at the current level of funding. So the governor's recommendation will allow us to start addressing some of those issues there. For a healthcare contract, we contract with Centurion. They've been in place since July of 2020. It's a full risk contract where they are responsible for providing all care, with two exceptions. One being anyone who's eligible for Medicaid and receives inpatient hospitalization services. In those cases, and there's last year about 400 patients that we were able to bill Medicaid for. And then we were able to, this fiscal year, start purchasing hepatitis C drugs directly through the 340B drug pricing program. And we've been able to realize about a 30% reduction in the cost of the hepatitis C drugs, which we were able to redirect some of those savings towards the Aramark contract to help cover that increase and reduce our ask this fiscal year. And then the rest being put towards the Centurion contract in this fiscal year to cover increases due to our increase in population. So there's no additional funding being requested or in FY24 for the healthcare contract. However, by 2025, because of continued growth in the population, our anticipation that our staffing at the facilities on the contract will continue to improve, and with that, performance guarantees due to audit fines will continue to decrease, as well as a 3% escalator. The governor has added in $2.3 million to help fully fund this contract going into fiscal year 25. Moving on to employee compensation. So the last two pay plans have has helped us out tremendously with our vacancies. This graph shows what our weekly vacancy rate has been since July of 2021 through mid-January of this year. And as you can see, going through 2021 into 2022, we're steadily increasing our vacancy rates, where we peaked in January of 2022 with a 25% vacancy rate, or about 475 of our total authorized corrections officers in our adult facilities were open. In January 2022 is when the 24/7 pay plan started appearing on employees' checks, and we're able to start advertising those job postings at a higher rate to include the 24/7 differentials. And this is where we started to see the decline in our vacancy rate. Fast forwarding over to last April when the appropriations bill was passed, and that's represented with the second arrow there on the right. That's when the corrections pay plan, the 10% increase for all corrections employees, went into effect. And this is when we saw a tremendous improvement in our staffing. As you see that the vacancy rate there dropped substantially following the passage of the appropriations bill last April. Today, we're running about 11.5% vacancy rate amongst the corrections officers in our adult facilities. Norton is the only facility that's continuing to see vacancy rates above 25%. In parole, we're running a 4% vacancy rate with 5 openings today, plus 1 support position in parole. KJCC, the Kansas Juvenile Correctional Complex, is still struggling with a close to 20% vacancy rate. And we're not quite sure what that issue is there, why they're having that much difficulty when the Topeka Correctional Facility just down the street has only, five vacancies as of January 15th. We have contracted with a consultant to embark on a recruitment campaign. And so they're working at running a pilot project at KJCC and El Dorado to improve recruitment efforts, do a better job of advertising our positions, making the application process easier, doing a better job of following up with potential candidates, and just increasing the flow of applicants and increasing the rate hire rates within these positions. And so once this pilot's done, we're going to look at the results, make any necessary adjustments to that, and then roll this out across the rest of the agency. The governor's budget does include another 5% statewide pay plan to help keep up with the labor market and address the years of where there was no pay increases for state employees. This would also include an increase for the base, the minimum wage for state employees, if you will, up to $15 an hour. And so this would impact 45 of our employees within our agency. And these individuals would also receive the 5% across the board to address wage compression issues that would occur. So they're not making the same pay as new hires coming in. The governor is also proposing that the differentials that were approved with the 24/7 pay plan be made permanent and added to base pay in regards to differentials 1, 2, and 3. Differential 4, which is currently reserved for if a facility has a 25% vacancy rate or higher, that would be retained, but the qualifiers for that are going to be revised, and the Department of Administration will be looking at that and determining what qualifiers will be utilized for that differential 4. And then the governor is also proposing for salaried staff within the correctional facilities a 7.5% increase in addition to the 5% statewide pay plan. And this to address wage compression that we've had in these key leadership positions in our facilities. What we're experiencing now is that the individuals who would normally look at these opportunities and promote into these jobs, for them, it's either no pay increase or a very small increase, or in some cases, a pay cut for those individuals because they then lose their differentials that they've been earning to take a promotion within the facility. So this will help address some of that wage compression that we've been experiencing. The governor is also recommending $1 an hour premium pay for select officers as part of the COAS agreement. This includes our special operations response team officers, are also referred to as our tactical teams, those who are assigned to a restrictive housing unit, as well as those who are demonstrated to be bilingual in another language. And for that, the governor's added $1.2 million. And then, as Shirley mentioned, we are looking to rebid our contracts for officer uniforms, get a higher quality uniform for our staff, and increase the number of uniform items that we issue to our staff. And to fund that, the governor has added $2.1 million to the 25 budget. So earlier I mentioned we had the 530 or so residents who are working in the kitchens, and they receive incentive pay for that work. And so that's part of their facility job assignment. We have a number of inmates, roughly 2,800 throughout our facilities who are assigned to a variety of different positions, whether that's in food service, grounds maintenance, the laundry, and they are critical to providing for the day-to-day operations of the facilities. It's pretty common practice within the correctional systems throughout the country to utilize residents in this manner. Without these individuals doing this work, we would have to have state employees doing this. And it also helps occupy some of their time and help start developing some job skills and a work ethic, so they can hopefully use this as a stepping stone to a job with correctional industries or a private industry job. Our pay rates have been in place since at least the 80s. No one in the agency knows when these current pay rates were put in place. It's probably been more than 40 years since these were set. The lowest level A, is at 45 cents a day, with the highest pay level being at $1.05 a day. And so what the governor is proposing is to start increasing this bring the floor up to $1.28 a day and the max pay to $2.98 a day at a cost of $1.5 million. This doesn't get us where we need to be at, but it's a good first step towards getting incentive pay up to a little bit more reasonable level. It gives these individuals a little bit more money they can use to help pay off some of the fines and fees that they owe, be able to have a little bit of extra money to use in canteen or to make phone calls, not have to rely on their families to send them money for that. Regarding the Lansing Career Campus, Shirley touched on this as well. In 2021, legislation was passed to allow the secretary to form a nonprofit entity with the goal of soliciting private contributions to build a career and technical center at our facilities. Our first one, we're focusing on Lansing, and we've engaged with a consultant out of the Kansas City area to do a feasibility study on what kind of support we can garner from the business community for this project. And they've found that there's quite a bit of interest, not just from the society values of being able to provide these opportunities for our population, but also economic benefit for the workforce by being able to provide for job training skills and education. The one common theme they heard back from the business community is that they expect the state to have some financial contribution to this project as well. So, and our consultant suggested and recommended that be 50% of the total $40 million needed to construct the career campus. Half of that come from the state and be used to help leverage another $20 million for this project. So the governor has included $10 million in FY24 and FY25 for that match money for the career campus. And again, this is to provide education and job skills training opportunities for our population, 95% of whom they're going to release and going to go back to the communities. And there's an abundance of research that have shown that those who are able to get an education, finish their high school diploma, learn some job skills, and get on with the private industry, are able to find gainful employment and have a life-sustaining wage upon release, and are a third less likely to come back to prison after their release. The governor is also including $2.5 million for community corrections to help the community corrections agencies hire additional supervision officers and also to provide for additional services to the probation population. Again, with the inflation that we've all experienced, the purchasing power available before the community corrections agencies to have drug testing done, to access mental health and substance abuse services and other treatment programs for their population has declined. So this will help those agencies be able to access those services for the probation population. The governor also has two capital projects, as Shirley had mentioned in the recommendation. The first being a support services building for Topeka Correctional Facility. And this will be a $40.2 million one-time appropriation, no debt financing involved with this project. If you've not been to the Topeka Correctional Facility, it's two separate compounds. One which has the higher custody residence and the RDU, reception diagnostic unit, and then a separate campus for our lower custody residents. So we have a lot of duplication of operations with the two separate entrance points, two visitation rooms, two medical areas. And so this, in addition to that, our capacity at that facility today is 936. The facility was originally designed for 450 residents, and while we've been able to retrofit buildings to add to the bed capacity, our support areas are still designed for 436 residents. So our clinical areas are much smaller than what we would need for a population of this size. It's not the same standards that we have in the male facilities. We have one suicide watch room between the two campuses. We have no CDC approved isolation rooms, and no private infirmary rooms at TCF. So this project will allow us to bring our clinical space up to a standard that's more consistent with what we have at the male facilities, as well as provide one central point of entrance for staff and visitors and a visitation room. And so just give you a sense of the kind of the cramped space that our medical staff are having to operate in. These are just a couple of photos of a hallway where they're having to store equipment in because of lack of space, and one of our offices, again, being used for storage, and our one isolation room that we have there. The second project, again, is to replace the Hutchinson Correctional Facility. Like Topeka, this is actually multiple campuses. The oldest portion of the facility, the central unit, was constructed in the late 1800s. This has 42 square foot cells, which are no longer compliant with the American Correctional Association standards. They recommend an 80 square foot size cell. The facility is not air conditioned, which is increasingly being challenged in courts across the country, and successfully challenged in court. The facility is not ADA compliant. It is not fire sprinkled. The two other units, the east unit, which was a repurposed manufactured home factory, is wood construction, does not have fire protection systems, nor does the minimum security south unit, which is also wood construction. The facility condition assessment we had done by Carter Global Lee found over $130 million worth of immediate needs just to address mechanical, electrical, and plumbing issues that are beyond their useful life, and does not address any of the current code or ADA issues that we have with this facility, nor does it address the lack of air conditioning or the size of the cells. In their recommendation, they recommended that it would be better off to just build a new facility rather than trying to retrofit the current facility, because that'd be just cost prohibitive trying to do that. The new facility would be built on land that is already owned by the agency. We would add 404 beds to the design to help address some of the population increase that the Sentencing Commission has projected, as well as adding 20,000 square foot of program space, which is much needed, as well as accounting for our strong private industry partnerships there, 105 square foot of private industry space.
Can I stop you for a second?
Sure.
I think,
Thank you, Ms. Chair. Keith, question for you here. How many beds do we have right now?
At this facility, we have
No, I mean total beds.
total
in the
beds.
state.
Our design capacity is 10,600. So what we're actually staffed for is 9,877.
So this new facility would increase our beds by 400 across the whole state. Okay, now if you go back to that one slide where you had the graph going where we were in 29, where does this put us on that scale there? I mean, how farther will this carry us past 29, do you think?
That should,
I mean, that's a wild guess, I know, but.
yeah, all things being considered, it probably gets roughly FY31.
Yeah, we're just kicking the can down the road just a little bit.
That just assumes there's no further changes in sentencing laws to increase penalties or add new penalties.
Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Mitch.
And if you've not been to Hutchinson yet, we'd of course welcome any one of you to come tour the facility during the legislative break or any other time. There's just a few of the photos that kind of show what the facility looks like. On the left is the one of our 42 square foot cells. At one point, we were housing 2 residents in these cells. It landed us in. We had that was challenged on the grounds of conditions of confinement, a civil lawsuit, which was successful, and that resulted in the construction of Ellsworth and El Dorado at that time. And you can just see where the condition of the showers is the deteriorating concrete, where we've had to retrofit plumbing in buildings that didn't have plumbing and electrical before, and just some of the blind spots within the central unit there at Hutch. In keeping with the governor's goal of reducing state debt, the governor did recommend paying off our loan for the Athena 2 system. And this is our new information management system that should be rolling out here in the next few months to replace our legacy information system that was released in 1977. on the adult side, and the juvenile system that's probably about 24, 25 years old at this point. Currently, we have $3.3 million in debt service payments through fiscal year 26. The governor's recommendation would add $6.7 million to the KDOC budget, so we can go ahead and just pay that off early. And then lastly, the Discovery Center program, the governor has added some funding there to support and sustain this moving forward. What this is at the Children's Discovery Center in Topeka, we've been partnering with them since 2018 with the Topeka Correctional Facility, where they would reserve the facility for a day, and moms and grandmothers from TCF could go to the Discovery Center and spend the day with their children and grandchildren. So we have worked with the Discovery Center to develop a similar concept where we take this mobile play-free museum, is what it's called, to some of our male facilities at a location outside the facility, so our lower custody male offender residents can come and have a similar type of experience with their kids. And so what the governor's recommendation is would allow us to sustain those pilot programs for those facilities and add in some additional male facilities to the program. And then at our higher custody facilities, upgrade our visitation rooms so those higher custody fathers will be able to have the same experience there within the walls of the facility. So with that, Mr. Chair, that closes my remarks. I'll stand for any questions that you or the committee may have.
Any questions for Keith? Representative Delberding.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the current cells, 42 square foot in Hutch, what is the actual dimensions of these things?
We can get the actual dimensions.
But I mean, is it 6 by 8, 4 by? So not much bigger than a piece of plywood then. That's absolutely incredible. Okay, and then back on, I'm going to go back to the analysis, but it's not necessarily a question, but you showed 3,488 and a half FTEs on budget. About how many are there, or how much are you short at this point?
I'm sorry, which slide were you on?
Well, I'm getting the FTE count from here.
Oh, okay.
But I didn't know how many openings do you have, or how much are you short at this point in time?
As far as how many positions are we short to open up those closed housing units? I would have to get that for you. I don't have that on me right now.
Okay, no problem. And then that was an impressive graph, the impact of the recent pay plans. That looks really good, because I've sat in this committee and corrections for years that we were battling that. I can't remember, in the past year or two, did we move officers from capers to F&P?
No, we have not.
Is there an interest on that, and would it possibly help? Would it be neutral, or any comments?
We've not had any discussions on that here recently. That was not part of the governor's recommendation. Right now, with the staffing where it is today, I'm not sure if it's really going to help us much at all at this point, given the cost involved with that. I think we're open to doing that, anything to help provide a better benefit for our staff. With KP&F having the ability to retire at an earlier age and get a better benefit as a result, I think it is something that would, over the long term, our employees would like to have and would look forward to.
Okay, thank you. No further.
Okay, we have on Chairman Anderson on WebEx.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes, you can.
Awesome. Hey, thank you for your testimony today, and sorry I couldn't be there. Just a quick question regarding the reappropriation number. I believe, and I don't have it in front of me, I believe it was around 53 million. Why does that continue to grow, and what's your plan on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the Evidence-Based Programs Fund, it works a little bit differently than your traditional state general fund appropriation. When the juvenile justice reform was passed in 2016, the concept behind this was that the savings due to reduced incarceration of youth in the juvenile correctional facility, replacement in group homes, would be directed to this fund that can then be used for programs in the community to further reduce the number of youth going into an incarcerated setting or a group home. The initial impact of that legislation was probably much more significant than anyone anticipated. And so we had quite a bit of money being transferred into this fund. We closed a large juvenile correctional facility fairly soon after that legislation was passed, and our group home expenditures dropped from where we're spending roughly $18–19 million a year. To today, we haven't spent anything on our group home placement. So we've seen a considerable drop in that spending. At the same time, the Juvenile Justice Oversight Committee, which is responsible for making recommendations to the Secretary on how these funds are spent, was just starting to form and review different programs that are out there that are evidence-based for use of this fund. So this fund grew very quickly in terms of revenue available to utilize, but decisions being made on how to best utilize this took a little bit longer. So we do have a plan now in place to spend that balance down. With the current level of spending that the JGOC has recommended, that balance will be spent down somewhere in 2026, 2027. We do know that a lot of this money is going out in the form of grants. Sometimes the full amount that's made available won't be applied for, so that just keeps rolling forward. Or a grantee may not spend all their funds and that's returned back. So it'll probably be several years beyond that we spend that fund down to the current level of appropriations, which is around $12.5 million.
Thank you very much.
Representative Wiggle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation. Looking at your projections for beds, how many people are going to be there where it hits over 10,000 in fiscal year 27? Is that correct? In the red?
So on that graph, yes, the orange is where the projection is. Are when we hit the physical capacity is where the orange line intersects with the gray, and that for our actual staff capacity, it's going to be sooner than that, probably around fiscal year 26, 27.
Okay, and maybe I'm not understand this, but when and if that happens, are we going to have to readjust for more personnel to be working in those facilities? And will that also affect the food service contract as well?
Yes, as that population continues to grow, we'll need additional resources to fund food service and healthcare contracts, and to fill the positions that were or that we lost due to the drawdown of our bed space. We have that 582 beds today that are available but are offline because they're not staffed. So we would need the additional staffing to open up those housing units and add those 582 beds to get them back online, so we can get to that design capacity we have today of 10,600 by 2029.
So, well, I guess what I'm asking, maybe you've answered, factoring all that in, have you made allowances for that if that should occur, if and when that'll occur?
As our budget stands right now, we don't have the funding available in our budget to accommodate that. That would be something we'd have to look at as a additional funding request when we get closer to that fiscal year where we hit that apex.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Bloom.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Bradshaw, are we still losing employees to other states? And if so, what wages should we be paying?
The wages first of all, the 5% pay plan for the governor's proposed, that's going to help keep us competitive with our other states and the local markets. Right now, our staffing is in a much better position than they were. I don't know that we're losing too many people to other states. Probably what we're struggling with, particularly in Norton, is a lack of housing. Norton's a perfect example of what's happening in rural America and the availability of housing. On a call a few months ago with the secretary and the warden from Norton, she described an individual who came to work there for us, loved the job, loved what she was doing, but she was living in her car in the parking lot because there was literally nowhere for her to go there, and ultimately had to quit and move somewhere else because of the lack of housing. That's probably our bigger challenge that we have right now, particularly in the rural communities, with our staffing today.
Lack of child care.
And lack of child care, yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I just have a couple. On the enhanced pay plan, has to be renewed, or is that permanent now?
Is that the addition of the differentials?
Right.
So in the governor's budget, those would be added to base pay, and would remain within the individual's base pay. It's already funded in our budgets, the differentials, and that's already built into the fiscal year 25 budget. So there would be no additional funding needed to do that.
So it's a renewal of the,
An extension of the current program, right? It'd just be rolled into base pay rather than awarded as a differential.
I have a question about uniforms. Who, do they have a cleaning budget for that or an allotment for that, or the officers have to do that on their own?
They have to do that on their own. There's no allotment for that.
Okay. And I know they're asking for the $377 million for the hutch. At what stage are we right now as far as the planning? Have we done any planning whatsoever?
Not outside just the basic cost estimate of what it would look like. We've not commissioned an architectural program yet at this point. Initially, they were looking at this being a fiscal year 26 project, but given the financial condition of the state and the ability to pay cash for this, the governor recommended that we go ahead and look at this, doing this a year early.
And I just wanted to ask a question off of Representative Wegel's last question on additional staffing. If we're going to increase 404 beds, how many additional staff are we going to have to hire?
For Hutchinson, we've not done that analysis yet. Part of it's going to come down to how we design this new facility and what the new staffing pattern would look like. It would not be like with the Lansing project. I know there's a lot of discussion on efficiencies and reduced staffing for that facility, and part of that was tied to the ability to pay for that lease. This is going to be more of an approach of what's the right staffing level, what's the right design for this facility, for the population being served, and what's the proper staffing level there. And so there may be some efficiencies because we would combine some of these dispersed housing units into a more central location that would help address that. But when we get to that point, we'll have a better idea of what the staffing requirements are going to be for that facility once we get a good design for it.
Any other questions? Representative Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to ask this question. Do these photographs depict an actual usable space in the facility? So this is an actual in-use cell that we're looking at? Thank you.
Representative Governor.
Yeah, thank you. Just a quick question. I remember when we did the Lansing project, and that was like a lease to own, I believe. When we do Hutch, is it going to be a lease to own or just a cash or a bond, or what do we? Or do you even know at this point in time?
The intent's not to do a lease purchase like we do with Lansing. Would be, as the governor's recommendation is, it would be a one-time appropriation. The method how we do that, whether it's design bid build or design build contract, or that's not been decided yet. I think we're a little far off from doing that, but it would be we would pay for the facility outright. There would be no leasing back the facility like we do with Lansing.
Is there any way to move forward to getting Lansing paid off in hours?
The financing on Lansing's a little bit more complex because the bonds for that was issued by Core Civic, who owns the building today. If there was an early payoff, there's penalties involved with that to make the bondholders whole for the. So we'd owe not just the rent, the remaining rent that's due, but also any prepaid interest and the principal, and then the premium to the bondholders to make them whole.
Thank you.
Okay, I guess that's it. All right, thank you, Keith. Randy Regard has asked to give us a few minutes for community corrections, and Randy, it's all yours.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chairman and committee members. My name is Randy Regier. I'm the Director of Reno County Community Corrections and the President of the Kansas Community Corrections Association. I provided you my PowerPoint for you to review, but I'll keep my comments very brief. We've worked closely with our partners to develop an enhanced funding request we believe will be reasonable, responsible, and enhance public safety. This request for an additional $5 million in our grants includes two focus areas. First, we're asking for $1.5 million to add intensive supervision officers across the state. Second, we're asking for $3.5 million for operations and interventions. This includes things like substance abuse, mental health, and behavior change interventions and services, as well as assistance to people on probation. Currently, there are about 155 community corrections officers across the state. Based on the recommended caseload sizes, we need an additional 51 officers. We want to add those officers over a 3-year period by increasing the grant funding by $1.5 million per year. We've had 11 years of flat funding for operations, but our costs have continued to climb. Doing more with less has really just become doing less. Governor Kelly's budget only provided an additional $1 million to address this shortfall. You can see on slide 6 of that handout how far that actually goes in each of your communities. It's not as far as we'd like. Community corrections supervision saves the state money by diverting people from incarceration. We also work to keep your community safe. I'm asking you to support this enhanced budget request of $5 million for the community corrections grants. I thank you again for allowing me this time. I'm happy to stand for any questions.
Any questions for Randy? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, is there anything else? Nope, I guess we're adjourned. Okay. Recommendations on Monday.